And so I want to propose a question here this morning. I read this, I think it was in Francis Chan's book, Crazy Love. A lot of you have read this book. I couldn't remember until somebody reminded me last night where I read this comment. I thought I came up with it on my own. I didn't. But he says something along these lines. If Jesus was removed from your life. Now, I could probably end this sermon right here. It might even be a good idea. If I could send you home with this question, and if I could get you to think about this question, and if I could get you to ponder this question, and to ask yourself honestly, and to try and answer it honestly, it's this. If Jesus Christ is removed from your life right now, what does it change? What does it change? If there's no Jesus, now for some of you, it changes what you're doing right now. At least I get my Sunday back. What does it change in your life? And I'm going to share something personally that I think the Holy Spirit's leading me to share right now. It's not in my notes or anything. I think for many of us sitting in the church, sitting here this morning right now, I wonder about our salvation. And I think it hinges on the answer to this question. I wonder if it changes anything. And the reason why I'm feeling led to ask this question and to answer it this way and to offer this is because I speak with many of you. And I wonder, where is the fruit? If Jesus is this transforming God-man, why isn't he transforming us? And so if we remove Jesus, and I think that's maybe the question you need to ask yourself this morning, maybe the only one, maybe you can ignore everything else I'm about to say for the rest of the sermon. Is Jesus transforming my life? And if he's removed, for some of you, you remove a lucky rabbit's foot. Jesus is your boyfriend. You kind of cling to Jesus when you're in trouble, and that's it. For some of you, Jesus is, makes you he's a good luck charm. Makes you more comfortable with life. Now, I want to show you the contrary point to that, or the other side of that question is this. Only you know the answer to that. Only you know the answer to whether or not you actually believe and delight. See, I think, as I said a couple weeks ago, all of you probably believe in Jesus. Very few of you don't believe in Jesus here this morning. We're not a church full of atheists and agnostics. We're full of religious people. And so I think that many of us believe in Jesus, and we cling to John 3:16. We see it raised up at a football game, and we're like, oh yeah, that's great. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Or we cling to verses such as Romans, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, then you will be saved. And we confess, we believe those things. We say we believe, but that word believe means nothing to us. I think the question might actually be, do you delight in Jesus Christ? Is he your delight? Because then if you remove Jesus from your life, that means your delight is removed, and that means you're utterly lost without Christ. And if you're honest with yourselves this morning, many of you are not in that position. And here's why. Because we delight in other things, as James is saying. So I ask you this second question. I did come up with this one on my own. If your riches were removed, if the things that you do delight in were removed, and as for many of you, they have been removed, what would it change? If you lost your job tomorrow, now your life has changed, isn't it? If you lost one of your children tomorrow, now your life is changed. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that we're having church here, and the last bit of food is the communion bread. And we find this out. You're all tweeting. Also, we hear there's no more food in the world. Sounds strange at first, but I want you to think about that just for a second. Take yourself there. No more food. You already had your last. This is all we got, communion. That's it. What would change? There's a man named Elie Wiesel. He was in the concentration camp in World War II, a Nazi concentration camp, a Jewish man. And he wrote a book. He's not a Christian. And he tells this story. It's one of the most painful stories I've ever read. Laura gave it to me on the airplane on the way back. It's all I could read. But he said, they brought everybody out into a line, all the Jews out into a line in a concentration camp, and they hung a little boy. Put him on the gallows pole and hung him there and made everybody watch. And in this one situation, the little boy did not die. He just hung there, kicking and screaming. And Elie asked the question, where is God? And one of the other Jewish prisoners said, he's hanging there on that pole. Now, for a Christian, we look at Jesus and we say, okay, that's incredible. Yeah, that's what Jesus did. But that's not what the man was saying. He was saying, your God is dying on that pole because there is no God. And Elie tells that story, and as he goes on throughout the book, he tells a story of, he said, I hated the Nazis for what they did to me in this. They turned us into animals. What they did is, his own father was calling for him when he was dying in the concentration camp. And Elie said, I did not care. I did not care as other people were dying around me. And the reason I did not care is because all I could think about is, where is the next piece of bread? And I think that's a depraved. Now, the temptation is for us to disconnect from that. But I think it has a lot to do with us spiritually. And with my question here this morning, what happens when what you delight in or what you need for survival is removed from the picture? You see, we need to view Jesus in that way. That bread of life, as he calls himself. It brings a whole new meaning to bread of life, doesn't it? Because if Jesus is removed from the picture, we are doomed. If Jesus is removed from your life, the answer to the question for each one of us should be this, that you should see the desperate nature of our situation. You should see how desperate we are without Jesus, so that if Jesus is removed, that's an impossibility to you for survival. That you know that I am doomed, I am dead in my trespasses, I've got no reason to live. There's no meaning in my life. Instead, what has happened is this. Our meaning is tied up in our fatherhood, our motherhood, our singlehood, our college degrees, our wealth, our house, our square footage, our cars, our church, our ministries, our programs, our mission, and things that in the grand scheme of things don't matter outside of Jesus. That's what James is saying. He's saying, you rich people, your God is dead. And yet, this is where you find your identity. And so I take us back